The wind, once a distant lament, now whispered secrets among the twisted trees that embraced the small cabin. Donna Aurora, with the rusty key heavy in her trembling palm, felt the damp cold of the forest penetrate her already fragile bones. The dry cough, her constant companion for years, rasped in her throat, a cruel reminder of the illness slowly consuming her. Doctors, bitter potions, empty promises. Nothing had worked. The cabin, bought for a pittance, almost a mockery, was her last refuge, her final gamble against fate. She had imagined a decrepit place, perhaps rat-infested, a melancholic end to a life that had already lost its luster with the departure of her beloved husband. But as she approached, something in the quietness of the place, in the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves and painted dancing patterns on the aged wood, seemed different. It was not the house of her nightmares, nor the promise of paradise, but a silent question mark, shrouded in moss and mystery. With a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all her losses, Donna Aurora inserted the key into the lock. The metal groaned in protest, a sharp sound that echoed in the solitude. The heavy, dark wooden door opened with a drawn-out moan, revealing not the darkness and mold she expected, but a sight that paralyzed her tired heart. It was not an empty cabin. It was an apothecary. The air inside, though dense and still for years, did not smell of decay, but of a heady mixture of damp earth, exotic spices, and dried herbs. Dark wooden shelves, from floor to ceiling, covered all the walls, filled with glass vials of all sizes and shapes, some sealed with ancient wax, others with dark cork stoppers. There were ceramic pots, carved wooden boxes, and bundles of plants hanging from the ceiling, their leaves and flowers dried, yet still retaining a vibrant color and a subtle aroma. A large workbench, covered by a thin layer of dust, displayed stone mortars and pestles, precision scales, and thick leather-bound books with yellowed pages and elegant forgotten script. Donna Aurora took a hesitant step inside, the door closing softly behind her with a click that made her start, the light entering through the small, dusty, spiderweb-covered windows created golden beams that revealed dust particles dancing in the air. She touched one of the vials, feeling the cold, smooth glass beneath her fingers. In it, an amber-colored liquid glowed, almost inviting. In another, dried leaves, a deep and mysterious green, rested like forgotten jewels. Her heart, which had previously beaten with the slowness of resignation, now quickened with a mixture of wonder and an almost childlike curiosity. Who had owned this apothecary? Why had it been left like this, intact, hidden beneath the facade of an abandoned cabin? And why, of all people, had she, a sick and hopeless widow, been the only one to find it? An open book on the table caught her attention. Its pages, though ancient, were surprisingly well preserved. With trembling hands, she leaned in, and her tired eyes fixed on detailed illustrations of plants, accompanied by notes in a language she did not fully understand, but whose images were unmistakable. These were plants she had seen many times, but always ignored, classifying them as weeds. But here in those pages they were drawn with reverence, described with a care that suggested a hidden power. One in particular, with serrated leaves and small purple flowers, seemed strangely familiar. She remembered seeing it in abundance, growing wild and unhindered, right there, on the ground around the cabin. A shiver ran down her spine, not from cold, but from a sudden and overwhelming revelation. Her cough for an instant fell silent. The illness that corroded her, the hopelessness that accompanied her, all seemed to recede before that glimpse. The weeds outside, those she thought she would need to pull to clear the land, were, according to those ancient writings, the cure. The cure for her disease. The tension in the air was almost palpable. The cabin was not a tomb, but a sanctuary, and the ridiculously cheap price. Perhaps it was not a mockery, but an invitation, an invitation to a secret guarded for centuries, patiently waiting for someone with eyes to see beyond the obvious and a heart desperate enough to believe in the impossible. Donna Aurora looked at the door, then at the shelves brimming with mystery, and finally at the image of the purple flower in the book. The journey of her healing, she realized, was just beginning, and it would start right there, amidst the dust and the scent of forgotten herbs. The air in the apothecary seemed to vibrate with an ancient energy, a secret that had patiently awaited its revelation. Donna Aurora, her heart beating an unsteady rhythm in her chest, felt the weight of that silence, a silence that suddenly was no longer empty, but filled with whispers of possibilities. The words in the book, though partly indecipherable, and the image of the purple flower, so common outside, so revered here, had lit a long, extinguished flame in her soul. It was as if the world had turned upside down. What she considered a nuisance, a plague to be eradicated, was, in fact, the key to her salvation. The irony was cruel and beautiful at the same time. How many times had she walked among those weeds, coughing, feeling life drain away, never imagining that the cure was there under her feet, waiting for someone with eyes to see it. A shiver ran down her spine, not from cold, but from a dizziness that mixed fear with an almost unbearable hope. Was it real? Could it be? After so many doctors, so many empty promises, so many bitter remedies that only sapped the little strength she had left, could the answer be so simple, so accessible, yet so well guarded? Her eyes scanned the shelves again, now with a new perspective. Each vial, each pot, each bundle of herbs hanging from the ceiling seemed to carry a story, a purpose. The apothecary was not just an accumulation of old objects. It was a universe, a compendium of forgotten knowledge, a testament to those who, before her, had understood nature's secret language. She approached the table, her trembling hands reaching for the book. The aged leather was soft to the touch. The yellowed pages exhaled an earthy, sweet scent. Carefully, as if fearing the parchment would disintegrate under her fingers, she turned the pages that followed the illustration of the purple flower. There were more drawings, more notes in an elegant script, but most of the words remained a mystery. It was an ancient language, perhaps Latin, perhaps something even more archaic, but the images, those were universal. She saw diagrams of preparations, symbols that seemed to represent phases of the moon or cycles of nature, and on some pages, small illustrations of people being healed, their faces once pale, now smiling. The cough, which had quieted for a moment of pure astonishment, returned, tearing at her throat with a renewed ferocity. It was a cruel and urgent reminder of her condition, a push for her not to get lost in contemplation, but to act. Hope was a balm, but illness was still a shadow. "I need to understand," she whispered into the void, her voice hoarse and weak. "I need to understand how." Her gaze fixed again on the purple flower, the vivid image in her mind. She remembered its abundance, the vibrant patches of color dotting the ground around the cabin. It was not a single plant, but a carpet of them, growing with a resilience she now saw as a sign, not an inconvenience. The cabin, bought for a pittance, was not an end, but a beginning. It was not a place to die, but to be reborn. The former owner, whoever they were, had left behind not a burden, but a legacy, a gift wrapped in mystery and oblivion, waiting for the right moment, for the right person. And for some reason she could not comprehend, that person was her. A sick widow on the brink of the abyss, who had lost everything, but who, in her last breath of hope, had stumbled upon a miracle. The tension was almost unbearable. The responsibility of unraveling that secret, of translating ancient knowledge for her own healing, was immense. She was not a scholar nor a herbalist. She was just Donna Aurora, an ordinary woman with an unusual illness and an extraordinary discovery. With an effort, she closed the book, feeling the rough texture of the leather under her fingers. She needed air, clarity. She needed to see the plant with her own eyes, not just in the illustration. The sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky in orange and purple hues that filtered through the dusty windows, casting long, dancing shadows across the apothecary. She took a step towards the door, the soft click that had startled her before, now seeming like an invitation. The world outside, which had once seemed hostile and indifferent, now called to her with a promise. The weeds waited, and she, Donna Aurora, was ready to listen to them. The journey would not be easy, she knew, but for the first time in a long time, there was a journey, and that, in itself, was the greatest of cures. The click of the door, once a fright, now seemed an invitation, a portal between two worlds. Donna Aurora, with the book closed and the image of the purple flower etched in her mind, took the first step out of the apothecary. The air, once dense and fragrant, gave way to a fresh, damp breeze, laden with the smell of wet earth and wild vegetation. The sun, which moments before had painted golden beams in the dusty interior, now bid farewell on the horizon, painting the sky in deep oranges and melancholic purples. She paused on the small wooden porch, her eyes sweeping the ground around the cabin. What was once just a thicket, a tangle of green she planned to eradicate, now revealed itself as a secret garden, a treasure hidden in plain sight. The tension in her chest was a strange mixture of euphoria and dread. Hope was a balm, yes, but also a double-edged sword, for the possibility of failure was now more terrifying than ever. Her cough, which had quieted in her admiration of the apothecary, returned with renewed intensity, a cruel reminder that time was her most relentless enemy. Each cough scraped her throat. Each breath was an effort, but behind the pain there was a new determination, a spark she thought she had lost forever. She descended the creaking steps, her feet sinking slightly into the tall, damp grass. Her gaze fixed, she searched. She searched for the patch of color, the familiar silhouette the book had revealed, and there it was, not one, but dozens, hundreds of them. Small purple flowers dotted the green, forming a vibrant carpet that stretched to the tree line. They were the weeds, the intruders she had seen so many times, without ever giving them the slightest attention. She approached a patch, her knees weak, but her mind sharp. She knelt with difficulty, feeling the dampness of the earth through the thin soles of her shoes. Her trembling fingers touched the serrated leaves, exactly like those in the illustration. The purple of the flowers was a deep, almost mystical hue, and a subtle, earthy, slightly sweet aroma rose to her nostrils. It was the same plant, there was no doubt, but identification was only the first step. The book, with its indecipherable notes, had only scratched the surface of what needed to be done. How to prepare, which part to use, the flower, the leaf, the root, in what quantity. Doubt was a slow poison, threatening to suffocate the newly lit flame of hope. She was not a herbalist, not a healer. She was just a sick woman with fragmented knowledge in her hands. The sun finally set, and darkness began to envelop the cabin and the grounds. Shadows lengthened, transforming the trees into ghostly figures and the weeds into indistinct patches. A chill ran through Donna Aurora, not just from the coming night's cold, but from the immensity of the task ahead. It was as if the universe had given her the answer, but hidden the instruction manual in a forgotten language. She stood up, her body protesting with every movement. The cabin, with its secret apothecary, now seemed a beacon in the darkness, a sanctuary of knowledge waiting to be unveiled. The tension was almost unbearable. The life she had given up for lost now hung by a thread woven with the leaves and flowers of those weeds. The responsibility was monumental. One mistake, one wrong dose, and what was a promise of healing could become a poison. Her years of urban life, of reliance on modern medicine, had not prepared her for this, for the silent language of nature, for the ancestral wisdom kept in dusty vials and ancient books. She looked at the apothecary, the door ajar like a persistent invitation. She needed to go back inside, revisit every shelf, every pot, every book. Perhaps there were more clues, more illustrations, something that could guide her. The night would be long, and sleep, if it came, would be restless. Her cough returned, stronger, deeper. She put her hand to her chest, feeling the pain that had accompanied her for so long. But this time, there was no resignation. There was an urgency, a need to fight. The cabin, the overgrown land, the weeds, all that she had bought for a pittance, was now her battlefield and her only hope. With a final look at the purple flowers, barely distinguishable in the gloom, Donna Aurora turned and re-entered the apothecary. The smell of damp earth and exotic spices enveloped her once more, an embrace of mystery and promise. The journey of her healing would not only be physical, but an odyssey of discovery, of learning a long-forgotten wisdom. And she, Donna Aurora, was ready to become the student. The tension, instead of diminishing, only deepened, for the true struggle, the fight to decipher the secrets of life and death, was just beginning under the flickering light of an ancient, forgotten apothecary. The apothecary door closed with a soft creak, swallowing Donna Aurora back into the fragrant, mysterious embrace of the past. Outside, night had fully fallen, transforming the carpet of purple flowers into mere indistinct shadows, a silent reminder of the promise and challenge that awaited her. Inside, the flickering light of an oil lamp, which she had lit with trembling hands, danced over the dusty shelves, casting ghostly figures on the walls. The smell of damp earth, brought in by the night breeze, now mingled with the dense aroma of dried herbs, exotic spices, and the unmistakable scent of aged paper. She approached the central table, where the leather-bound book rested. Her heart beat with a mixture of urgency and dread. Her cough, which had tormented her for years, seemed to have found new vigor, tearing at her throat with a ferocity that left her breathless. Each attack was a cruel reminder that time was a luxury she did not possess. Hope, though bright, was fragile, and illness a persistent shadow. With a sigh that seemed to pull the last shred of air from her lungs, Donna Aurora opened the book again. The yellowed pages, full of symbols and elegant script in a language she did not understand, seemed to mock her ignorance. She was not a scholar. She had no knowledge of Latin or any archaic dialect. She was just a simple woman, confronted with an enigma that could mean the difference between life and death. Her eyes scanned the illustrations, searching for any clue, any visual correspondence that could serve as a bridge to knowledge. The purple flower was there, vivid and detailed, but the notes beside it were an insurmountable wall. She tried to decipher the symbols, comparing them with the preparation diagrams, but it was like trying to assemble a puzzle without having the complete picture. Frustration began to set in, a slow poison that threatened to suffocate the flame of hope that had barely ignited. "It can't be this difficult," she murmured to herself, her voice hoarse and almost inaudible. "There has to be a way." With renewed effort she stood, her head spinning slightly. The apothecary, once a refuge, now seemed a labyrinth of well-guarded secrets. There were hundreds of vials, ceramic pots, carved wooden boxes. Did one of them hold the key? She began to rummage through the shelves, her trembling hands sliding over the cold surface of the containers. Many were empty. Others contained dried residues of herbs she did not recognize. On a lower shelf, almost hidden behind a large, dark glass jar, she felt something different. It was not a vial, nor a bundle of herbs. It was a small volume, bound in faded linen, much simpler than the large tome on the table. The title, if there was one, was faded by time. Carefully, she pulled it out. It was lighter, more worn. Upon opening it, a sigh of relief, mixed with a new wave of tension, escaped her lips. The pages were of finer parchment, and the script, though still ancient, seemed less formal, more direct. And most importantly, there were small drawings, almost scribbles, next to some words. It was not a complete translation, but it seemed like a visual glossary, a practical guide. Her eyes fixed on a page that showed an unmistakable purple flower. Beside it, there was a series of symbols and, below them, drawings of a mortar and pestle, a boiling pot, and finally, a teacup. Below the image of the flower, a word was repeated, with small variations, and next to the drawing of the pestle, a symbol that looked like an inverted 1, followed by a drawing of a leaf. "Leaf," she whispered, the word sounding strange in her mouth. A leaf. The tension in her chest was almost unbearable. It was a fragment, a small piece of the puzzle, but it was a start. The smaller book, apparently a compendium of basic recipes or a practical journal, seemed to be the bridge she needed. It did not translate the language, but it provided a visual context, a sequence of actions. She flipped through a few more pages, finding other drawings of plants and the actions associated with them: root, flower, seed, and crucially, dry, grind, infuse. With each discovery, the flame of hope grew, but the responsibility also weighed more heavily. The cough returned, more violent, and she bent over the table, clutching her chest. The pain was sharp, a constant reminder of the urgency. She needed to act, and fast. The small book did not offer exact doses, only the indication of a leaf or a flower. It was empirical knowledge, transmitted by observation and experience, not by the scientific precision she knew. With the small book in one hand and the large tome open to the illustration of the purple flower in the other, Donna Aurora sat on the apothecary's only chair, a rustic, worn wooden piece. Night was advancing, and the cold began to seep through the cabin's cracks. But she did not feel the cold, only the fever of discovery, the adrenaline of the fight. She needed a plan, a first step. The drawing of the purple flower in the larger book and the indication of leaf in the smaller one seemed to point to the same path. The simplest preparation, one that did not require complex tools or additional ingredients, seemed to be infusion. A tea. A leaf, she repeated, her eyes fixed on the drawing. For a tea. It was risky. She was not sure of the dose, the toxicity, anything, but the alternative was the slow and painful death that awaited her. The cabin, the weeds, the apothecary, all of it had been a gift, a last chance, and she would not waste it. The tension was palpable, almost a living entity in the dark apothecary. Donna Aurora, the sick widow, was about to take the first step on a journey that challenged everything she knew about life and healing. She was not a healer, but life had forced her to become one. With a determination she did not know she possessed, she closed the books. Tomorrow, at dawn, she would pluck her first leaf. The real battle was about to begin. Dawn arrived, not with the softness of a new beginning, but with the urgency of an ultimatum. Donna Aurora had not slept. The night was a whirlwind of thoughts, fears, and a stubborn hope that refused to die. Each cough, each pang in her chest was a cruel reminder of time slipping away. But this time there was no despair, only a cold and unwavering resolve. She had found a map, albeit incomplete, and was determined to follow its instructions whatever the cost. With the first rays of sun peeking through the cabin's cracks, tinging the interior with a pale, ghostly gold, Donna Aurora rose. Her body protested, joints creaking, head slightly light. But her mind was clear, focused on the task that awaited her. The small book, her unexpected guide, rested on the table, open to the page of the purple flower and the leaf symbol. It was a call, an invitation to the unknown. She stepped out of the apothecary, the fresh morning air kissing her tired face. Dew covered the weeds, making them sparkle under the incipient light. The carpet of purple flowers, which the night before had been merely an indistinct promise, now revealed itself in all its vibrant glory. There was a wild, almost defiant beauty in those plants that modern medicine had dismissed as useless. For Donna Aurora, they were the very essence of life, the border between illness and healing. With slow, deliberate steps, she approached the patch. Her eyes scanned the plants, searching for the most vigorous, the most promising. It was an act of reverence, almost a sacred ritual. She, a city woman, accustomed to pharmacy shelves and printed leaflets, was now at the mercy of nature, harvesting her own medicine. The irony did not escape her, but there was no time for deep reflection. There was only the need to survive. She chose a robust plant, its purple flowers blooming in a silent invitation. With trembling but firm hands, she plucked a single leaf. It was neither large nor small, just a leaf. The symbol in the book gave no more details, only the unequivocal image of a leaf. As she pulled it, she felt a strange connection, as if she were harvesting not just a part of the plant, but a piece of her own hope. The earthy, slightly sweet scent of the leaf filled her nostrils, a fragrance of promise and mystery. Back in the apothecary, the oil lamp still flickered, a small point of light in the gloom. She placed the leaf on the table next to the mortar and pestle that the smaller book indicated. The process was simple, almost primitive. Carefully, she crushed the leaf, feeling the damp, fibrous texture under the pestle. The vibrant green of the leaf transformed into a dark paste, releasing a more intense, more herbal aroma. Next, she heated water in a small iron kettle she had found in one of the cabin's cupboards. Steam rose, fogging the air and her glasses. With the hot water, she poured the leaf paste into one of the rustic ceramic cups that also belonged to the apothecary. The water turned a pale green, and the scent of the infusion spread, a mixture of earth, dew, and something ancestral, almost forgotten. The moment of truth had arrived. The steaming cup rested in her hands, an elixir of life or a disguised poison. The tension was almost unbearable, a tight knot in her stomach. Her years of life, the memories of her husband, the pain of the illness, everything culminated in that instant. She had no certainty, no guarantees, only blind faith in knowledge that transcended time. With a deep sigh that seemed to pull the last shred of air from her lungs, Donna Aurora brought the cup to her lips. The liquid was warm, with a bitter, earthy taste that made her frown. It was not pleasant, but it was not unpalatable either. She drank slowly, feeling each drop descend her throat, a strange sensation of warmth spreading through her chest. She finished the cup, the silence of the apothecary amplifying the sound of her own breathing. And then she waited. Minutes dragged like hours. She sat on the wooden chair, her eyes fixed on the dusty wall, searching for any sign, any change. Her body, accustomed to pain and weakness, seemed not to react. There was no dizziness, no nausea, no sudden burst of energy that she, in her subconscious, perhaps expected. Her cough, her constant companion, remained silent for a brief period, but soon returned, a dry, irritating cough that made her put her hand to her chest. Frustration threatened to set in. Would it all be in vain? An illusion, a last cruel hope? But then, a subtle, almost imperceptible sensation. A different warmth, softer, less aggressive than fever, began to spread through her body. It was not a miraculous cure, not instant remission. It was something deeper, slower, as if the infusion was awakening something dormant within her. Her cough returned, but this time it seemed a little less deep, a little less painful. Or perhaps it was just suggestion, her desperate mind seeking a sign. Donna Aurora did not know. The uncertainty was a heavy burden, but the small flame of hope, which had been lit the night before, did not extinguish. On the contrary, it seemed to have strengthened, fueled by the first dose of her new medicine. The day advanced slowly. She remained in the apothecary, rereading the books, observing the vials, immersed in a world that was both ancient and new. With each passing hour, she monitored her body, searching for any indication. The pain in her chest seemed a little less intense, her breathing a little less labored, and her cough, though still present, came at longer intervals, with less ferocity. As night fell, Donna Aurora was exhausted, but a different kind of exhaustion. It was not the fatigue of illness, but the weariness of battle, of waiting. She was not cured, far from it. But something had changed. The line between life and death, once so tenuous, seemed to have gained a little more thickness. The apothecary, the herbs. The cabin, her battlefield, had given the first sign of a possible victory. The real struggle, however, was just beginning. She knew she would need more than a leaf, more than an infusion. The journey would be long and the path uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, Donna Aurora felt she had a chance. The following dawn did not bring the miraculous cure that despair, in some recessed corner of her soul, might still have hoped for, but it brought something more valuable: confirmation. Her cough, though still present, was a shadow of its former self. The pangs in her chest had diminished, transforming into a dull ache, almost bearable. The warmth spreading through her body was no longer the overwhelming fever, but a soft ember, an internal fire that seemed to combat the cold of the disease. Donna Aurora was not cured, but she was better. The tenuous line between life and death, once almost invisible, now seemed to have gained an unexpected solidity. Hope, once a flickering flame, now burned with renewed intensity. It was not blind hope, but hope forged in experience, in the bitter, earthy taste of that first infusion. She had taken the first step, and the ground beneath her feet had not crumbled. On the contrary, it seemed firmer than ever. But the initial euphoria soon gave way to a more sober understanding. A leaf, an infusion, would not be the end of the journey. It was only the beginning. The small book, her silent guide, did not speak of instant cures, but of processes, of cycles. The illness that had consumed her for months would not disappear with a single sip of tea. It would require persistence, patience, and above all, more knowledge. She repeated the infusion in the morning and again at night. With each dose, the improvement was subtle, almost imperceptible to an external observer, but for Donna Aurora, it was a universe of difference. Her breathing became a little easier, the fatigue less oppressive. She could spend more time on her feet, leafing through the books, examining the dusty vials of the apothecary with a curiosity that the illness had stolen. The apothecary, once a frightening mystery, now revealed itself as a sanctuary of wisdom. Each vial, each drawer, each shelf seemed to whisper ancient secrets. The large tome, with its detailed illustrations and indecipherable script, was a treasure waiting to be unveiled, and the small compendium, with its simple drawings and sequences of actions, was the key. Donna Aurora spent the following days immersed in this study. She compared the drawings in the smaller book with the illustrations in the large tome, searching for patterns, connections. The purple flower, the leaf, the infusion, that was the first lesson. But there were many others, drawings of roots, seeds, barks, symbols for dry, grind, ferment, distill. The complexity of the ancestral knowledge the apothecary held was overwhelming, but she was not intimidated. Her cough, though controlled, was still a constant reminder of the urgency. She needed to go beyond the simple infusion of the purple leaf. She needed to understand the next step. The small book seemed to indicate that different parts of the plant, or different preparations, were used for different purposes, or perhaps at different stages of the illness. One of the drawings in the smaller compendium caught her attention. It was the same purple flower, but next to it, a new symbol, a small bowl with something that looked like powder, and below the indication to dry and grind. The fresh leaf was for infusion, but what about the powder? Would it be a more concentrated dose, a form of storage? The idea of drying the leaves came to mind. As a city woman, she had never thought of such things, but the logic was undeniable. Dried herbs lasted longer, could be ground into powder, perhaps for a more potent action or for use in other preparations. With new determination, Donna Aurora left the cabin. The morning sun bathed the weeds in a golden glow. This time, she did not pluck just one leaf. With reverent care, she collected several leaves from the purple flower, choosing the most vigorous, the healthiest. Back in the apothecary, she spread them on a clean cloth, exposing them to the air and light filtering through the window. The process would be slow but necessary. While the leaves dried, she continued her study. The small book, with its deceptive simplicity, began to reveal a structure. There were sections dedicated to different types of plants, each with its own symbols and preparation methods. She began to realize that the apothecary was not just a heap of herbs, but a system, a complete pharmacy, waiting for someone who knew how to read its secrets. The tension, though now tempered by hope, was still a constant presence. With each cough, each pang of pain, she remembered the race against time. But now she felt she was gaining ground. The apothecary, the cabin, the weeds, all of it had been a gift, a last chance, and she was determined to use it. The journey was long and the path uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, Donna Aurora felt she had a chance, a real, palpable chance built on centuries of wisdom and the resilience of a woman who refused to give up. She was not a healer, but life had forced her to become one. And she was learning, leaf by leaf, symbol by symbol, the forgotten language of healing. The next step would be the powder, the next battle, the deciphering of the apothecary's deepest mysteries. The scent of drying purple leaves mingled with the earthy, ancestral aroma of the apothecary, creating a new layer in the complex olfactory tapestry of the place. Donna Aurora observed them with the patience that only life's urgency and nature's slowness can teach. Spread on a worn linen cloth near the window where the sunlight kissed them for a few hours a day, they slowly shrank and darkened, losing the vibrancy of green and purple for a more opaque, almost grey tone. Each day was a small eternity of waiting, a test of her newfound resilience. As time did its work with the leaves, Donna Aurora delved even deeper into the apothecary's mysteries. The small compendium, now her inseparable companion, revealed itself as a map, and the large tome, the detailed landscape. She traced the lines of the drawings, comparing the shapes of the plants, the symbols of preparation, the sequences of actions. The language was pictorial, yet universal, and her mind, once accustomed only to the codes of the city, began to decipher the wisdom of the earth. She noticed that the symbol for dry was often followed by one for grind, and this, in turn, by others indicating different forms of use. A small spoon, a glass of water, or even direct application to the skin. The complexity was vast, but the logic was undeniable. It was not a single cure, but an arsenal of remedies, each with its specific purpose, dosage, and method of administration. The apothecary was not a coincidence. It was a legacy, a complete pharmacy, waiting for someone who knew how to read its secrets. Her cough, though milder, was still a constant reminder of the race against time. The pangs in her chest had diminished, but weakness was still present. Especially after long hours of study. She knew that the fresh leaf infusion was only the first step, a palliative that kept her afloat. The powder, she intuited, would be the next phase, perhaps a more concentrated, more potent dose, capable of attacking the disease with greater ferocity. After days that stretched into weeks, the leaves were ready. Withered, brittle to the touch, they had lost almost all moisture, transforming into a light, fragile material. With almost ritualistic care, Donna Aurora collected them from the cloth. The next step was to grind them. In the corner of the apothecary, among dusty vials and pestles of different sizes, she found a small, smooth, heavy stone pestle with a matching mortar. It was perfect for the task. She placed the dried leaves in the mortar, feeling the rough, dry texture under her fingers. With the pestle, she began to crush them, a slow, circular motion. The sound was soft, a dry rustle that mingled with the cabin's silence. With each movement, the leaves broke into smaller pieces, releasing an aroma more intense, more concentrated than that of the fresh leaf. It was a smell of dry earth, of sun, and of a dormant potency. Slowly, grain by grain, the leaves transformed into a fine, greenish powder, almost like ancient talc. The color was a deeper, darker green, a visual sign of concentration. The powder rested in the mortar, a small mountain of hope. Donna Aurora consulted the small compendium again. The symbol accompanying the powder indicated a small spoon, and next to it, a glass of water. It was not an infusion, but a dilution. A smaller dose, perhaps, but of a much more potent extract. With trembling but firm hands, she took one of the wooden spoons she had found in the apothecary. It was a small spoon, almost a teaspoon measure. She filled it with the greenish powder and poured it into one of the rustic cups. Then she added a little fresh water, not hot as in the infusion, but cold, taken from a clay jar that kept the water always cool. The powder dissolved slowly, tinging the water an even darker green, almost moss-like. The smell was strong, pungent, but not unpleasant. It was the smell of healing, she thought. The moment of truth had arrived again. The first infusion had brought relief, but the powder promised more. It promised an advance, a step forward in the battle against the disease. She brought the cup to her lips. The taste was stronger, more bitter and earthy than the infusion, but bearable. She drank it all at once, feeling the dense liquid go down her throat. There was no immediate sensation of warmth from the infusion. Instead, a quietness, a silence that spread through her body, starting in her stomach and radiating outwards. Minutes passed. Her cough, which had been a constant companion, was absent. The pain in her chest, which had been a dull presence, now seemed to have receded even further, almost becoming a distant echo. It was not an instant cure. It was not the burst of energy she, in her desperation, still dreamed of. It was something deeper, more fundamental. It was as if the powder had silenced the noise of the illness, allowing her body, exhausted by the struggle, to finally begin to rebuild itself. The weakness was still there, but it seemed less oppressive. A lightness, a sense of clarity began to set in. Her mind, once clouded by fever and pain, now seemed sharper, more capable of processing the information the apothecary offered. Donna Aurora took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, she felt her lungs expand a little more without the familiar pang of pain. Hope, which had been a flickering flame, now burned with renewed intensity, fueled by the palpable evidence that she was on the right path. The quietness the powder brought was an immense relief, but Donna Aurora knew it was not the end. It was just another step on the steep ladder of recovery. With a clearer mind, she returned to the small compendium, feeling a renewed urgency, the leaf, the powder. And then, her eyes scanned the pages, searching for the next link in the chain of healing. It was then that she noticed a new set of symbols, associated with the same purple flower, but this time indicating something more complex. It was not just the leaf or the powder. There was a drawing of a root being unearthed, and next to it, the symbol for ferment. The cure would not be simple. It would require a deeper dive into the earth and perhaps into the alchemy of time. The apothecary did not reveal all its secrets at once. It whispered them one by one, demanding patience, observation, and a courage Donna Aurora did not even know she possessed. The next battle would not only be the deciphering of a symbol, but the extraction of a root, and the wait for the transformation that fermentation would bring. The journey was far from over, and the overgrown land outside with its weeds still held many mysteries. The quietness the powder brought was an immense relief, a balm for the soul and for her exhausted body. It was not the definitive cure, she knew, but it was a welcome silencing of the constant noise of the illness, a truce that allowed her mind, once clouded, a renewed clarity. Her cough now was just an occasional sigh, and the pangs in her chest had transformed into distant memories, almost unreal. It was as if the powder had built a tenuous but effective barrier between her and the ailment, giving her breathing room for the next stage. With a sharper mind and renewed urgency, Donna Aurora returned to the small compendium, the leaf, the powder, and then her eyes scanned the pages, searching for the next link in the chain of healing. It was then that she noticed a new set of symbols associated with the same purple flower, but this time indicating something more complex, more rooted. There was an unmistakable drawing of a root being unearthed, and next to it, the symbol for ferment. The cure would not be simple. It would require a deeper dive into the earth, and perhaps into the alchemy of time. A shiver ran down her spine, unearthing a root. She, a city woman, whose hands had barely touched the earth except to plant a flower in a pot. The idea of digging, of getting dirty, of struggling against the soil was strange and a little frightening. Her body, still weak, protested just at the thought of the effort. But the image of the purple flower, the promise of life it represented, was stronger than any hesitation. The apothecary did not reveal all its secrets at once. It whispered them one by one, demanding patience, observation, and a courage Donna Aurora did not even know she possessed. The next battle would not only be the deciphering of a symbol, but the extraction of a root, and the wait for the transformation that fermentation would bring. With a determination that bordered on stubbornness, Donna Aurora left the cabin. The sun was already high, warming the air and the soil. She had no gardening tools, but the apothecary, in its silent generosity, had provided a small wooden rake and a hand shovel, rustic but functional, found in a forgotten corner. She knelt near a cluster of the purple flowers, the same ones that had given her the leaves and the powder. She breathed deeply, smelling the damp earth and the sweet aroma of the flowers. The soil was denser than she imagined. Each movement of the shovel required considerable effort from her arms and shoulders, muscles that had not been challenged in this way for a long time. The sticky earth clung to the shovel, and her hands, once soft and cared for, began to get dirty and rough. With each handful of earth removed, she felt a deeper connection to the place, to the life that sprouted from it. It was arduous, exhausting work, but every ounce of effort was an investment in her own survival. After what seemed an eternity of digging and removing earth, her fingers touched something firm and fibrous. Carefully, she removed the surrounding soil, revealing a robust root of a reddish-brown hue that extended deep into the ground. It was thicker than she expected, with small tendrils clinging to the earth. With a final effort, she managed to detach it, pulling it out with a soft sucking sound. The root, still covered in earth, pulsed with a silent energy in her hands. It was life in its rawest, most fundamental form. Back in the apothecary, she washed the root under fresh water from the jar, watching the earth detach and reveal the smooth, fibrous surface. The smell was earthy, deeper and more concentrated than that of the leaves. The compendium indicated that the root should be chopped into small pieces before fermentation. With a small, sharp knife found among the apothecary's utensils, she began to cut the root, feeling the resistance of the fiber under the blade. Each piece was a promise, a step forward. The next challenge was fermentation. The symbol in the compendium showed the chopped root inside a clay container, covered, and a period of waiting. She rummaged through the apothecary shelves, finding a small dark ceramic pot with a lid that fit perfectly. It was the ideal container. The book indicated that the root should be covered with rainwater, or in its absence, fresh water, and left in a dark, cool place. She filled the pot with the root pieces, covered them with water from the jar, and sealed the container with the lid. She found a dark, cool corner at the back of the apothecary, under a dusty shelf, and placed the pot there. The waiting began. A different wait than that for drying the leaves or for feeling the effect of the powder. This was a wait for an invisible transformation, an alchemical process that depended on time and nature. The apothecary was not just a repository of remedies, but a living laboratory where life transformed into healing. The tension now was a mixture of anticipation and a deep reverence for the process. Donna Aurora felt she was becoming part of something much larger than herself, a guardian of ancestral knowledge. Each day, she checked the pot, without opening it, just feeling the weight and temperature, imagining the changes occurring inside. The smell of the apothecary, once just earthy and of dried herbs, now had a new layer, a light and subtle aroma that seemed to emanate from the pot, a hint of ongoing fermentation. Weakness was still present, but hope, fueled by each small victory, was a powerful engine. She was not a healer, but life had forced her to become one, and she was learning, root by root, symbol by symbol, the forgotten language of healing. The journey was far from over, and the overgrown land outside, with its weeds, still held many mysteries, and the apothecary, many secrets to be revealed. The waiting began. It was not the anxious waiting for a medical diagnosis, nor the resigned waiting for the inevitability of illness. It was an active waiting, permeated by an almost childlike curiosity and a newfound faith. Donna Aurora felt time stretch and shrink within the apothecary. Days transformed into a sequence of silent rituals. Waking, checking the small, dark ceramic pot without touching it, just observing its place in the cool, dark corner. She imagined the chemical reactions, the microscopic life at work, transforming the earthy root into something new, something potent. Each morning, the apothecary air seemed denser, with a subtle smell that mingled with the familiar aroma of dried herbs and earth. It was a bittersweet odor, a ferment that spoke of transformation, of something maturing in its silence. Weakness was still a shadow, but her cough had almost disappeared, and the pains in her chest were just a distant echo, a memory of a recent past that seemed to belong to someone else. The powder had silenced the noise of the illness, and the wait for the fermented root was the promise of a symphony of healing. She spent hours studying the compendium, deciphering more symbols, absorbing the ancestral knowledge the apothecary held. The pages seemed to vibrate under her fingers, revealing not just recipes, but a philosophy of life, a deep connection with nature that she, a city woman, had never imagined. The apothecary was not just a refuge, but a school, and she, a dedicated student. The tension grew each day. There was uncertainty. What if the fermentation went wrong? What if the pot was not right, or the temperature not ideal? Her life depended on it. But strangely, there was also a calm, an acceptance that she was doing everything she could, following the instructions of a guide that seemed tailor-made for her. It was as if the cabin, the apothecary, and the weeds had been waiting for her all her life. After what seemed like weeks, but which the compendium indicated as 7 days and 7 nights, the moment arrived. The symbol of the purple flower, next to the drawing of the fermented root, now showed a small circle with a wavy line, which she interpreted as cook or boil, and then a drop falling into a container, suggesting an extract or an essence. With slightly trembling hands, Donna Aurora approached the pot. The smell was now more intense, more pungent but not unpleasant. It was a complex aroma, earthy and slightly alcoholic, with a sweet touch that reminded her of ripe fruits. She lifted the lid. Inside, the water was cloudy, a dark reddish-brown hue, and the root pieces, once firm, seemed softer, almost gelatinous. Small bubbles slowly rose to the surface, a sign that life had worked there, transforming the matter. The compendium instructed her to strain the liquid and discard the solids. She took a fine sieve, made of natural fibers, which she had found in one of the apothecary's drawers. Carefully, she poured the contents of the pot, separating the dark, dense liquid from the root remnants. The resulting extract was almost syrupy, with a dark honey color. It was the essence of the root, the concentrated promise of healing. The next step was to heat the extract. The compendium showed a clay container over a gentle flame. She lit the small wood stove, which she used to heat water, and placed a small ceramic pot on it. She poured in the extract, watching the dark liquid bubble gently. The smell intensified, filling the apothecary with an aromatic vapor that seemed to penetrate her lungs, bringing a sensation of warmth and relief. The book indicated that the extract should be reduced to 1/3 of its original volume, until it became even denser, almost a paste. She watched the process with fascination, the water evaporating, the essence concentrating, the cure becoming more potent with each minute. When it reached the desired consistency, a thick, shiny syrup, she removed the pot from the fire. The moment of truth had arrived again. The compendium showed a small spoon of the syrup being consumed. She took a wooden spoon, dipped it into the syrup, and brought it to her lips. The taste was intense. An explosion of earth, sweetness, and a subtle bitterness that spread through her mouth. It was strong, but not unbearable. She swallowed. This time, the sensation was different from anything she had experienced before. It was not the quietness of the powder, nor the gentle warmth of the infusion. It was a wave of energy that started in her stomach and spread rapidly throughout her body. Like a river overflowing its banks, her muscles, once sore and weak, seemed to awaken. An even greater mental clarity set in, and she felt a lightness in her lungs that she had never felt, not even before the illness. She breathed deeply, and the air moved in and out without any effort, without any pang of pain. It was as if her lungs, once corroded by illness, had been rebuilt, purified. A renewed strength, a vitality she thought she had lost forever, pulsed in her veins. She stood up, and for the first time in a long time, she did not feel the familiar dizziness, nor the need to lean on anything. Donna Aurora walked to the window, observing the overgrown land outside, the weeds she now saw with different eyes. They were no longer pests, but guardians of secrets, bearers of life. Healing was not just a possibility, it was a palpable reality. But as euphoria enveloped her, a new perception formed in her mind. The apothecary had not finished speaking. Healing was a process, a journey, and each stage revealed more than just a remedy. There was something more, something that the compendium in its last pages seemed only to whisper with still indecipherable symbols. The apothecary was not just about healing the body, but perhaps the soul. And the overgrown land outside, with its shadows and mysteries, still held the next lesson. The wave of energy that surged through Donna Aurora was not just physical. It was a resurrection. Every cell in her body seemed to vibrate with a life she thought had been drained forever. Her lungs, once a battlefield, now expanded and contracted with glorious ease, a welcome silence where before there had been only wheezing and pain. She breathed deeply, feeling the pure air of the apothecary fill every corner of her being, and a genuine smile, long forgotten, bloomed on her lips. It was not just a smile of relief, but of triumph. She had fought and won. But the euphoria, though powerful, was only the first layer. Behind it, a new perception formed, like mist dissipating to reveal an unknown landscape. The apothecary was not just a refuge, a cabinet of remedies. It was a living entity, a silent oracle that had guided her, step by step, through the labyrinth of illness. And healing, she now realized, was not the end point, but a new beginning. Her eyes turned to the compendium, resting on the workbench. The pages that were once a frightening enigma now seemed like a map, an invitation. She opened it again, leafing to the last pages, those with the indecipherable symbols. Before, her mind had been obscured by illness, focused only on survival. Now, with newfound clarity, the symbols seemed to pulse with a new light, as if they had been waiting for this moment. They were no longer random drawings. There was a sequence, a subtle logic that began to reveal itself. One symbol seemed to represent an ancient tree, with deep roots and branches stretching towards the sky. Beside it, a circle with a dot in the center, which she associated with the sun or a source of energy. And then, a stylized human figure, with open arms, as if in an embrace or an offering. It was not a recipe. It was not about a new herb or a new method of preparation. It was something deeper, something that spoke of connection, of purpose. The apothecary, in its silence, seemed to whisper. The healing of the body was merely the prelude. The true journey, the healing of the soul, was just beginning. She felt she had been chosen, not just to be healed, but to be a guardian, a bridge between ancestral knowledge and a world that had forgotten the language of nature. The tension now was not fear of death, but the immense responsibility that seemed to settle on her shoulders. She approached the window again, her gaze fixed on the overgrown land outside. The weeds were no longer just the source of her healing, but a vast and complex ecosystem, a sanctuary of life and wisdom. She felt a calling, a magnetic pull to go beyond the cabin, to delve deeper into the forest. Not to harvest, but to understand, to listen. The compendium, in its last pages, gave no clear instructions for a next potion. Instead, the symbols seemed to indicate a journey, a pilgrimage. The ancient tree, the sun, the human figure with open arms. It was a metaphor, she realized, an instruction to seek the source, to align with the earth's energy, to find her place within the great cycle of life. The apothecary, with its dusty shelves and mysterious vials, now seemed a portal. She had entered it as a sick and desperate woman, and was emerging as someone transformed with a new purpose. But what did this transformation mean? What did the apothecary expect of her now? Physical weakness had disappeared, but a new form of fragility set in, the uncertainty of the path ahead. It was as if the illness had been a veil, and now, with it removed, she saw the world with startling clarity. City life, mundane worries, all seemed distant, insignificant. Her existence had been redefined within the walls of that cabin, amidst the scent of herbs and the promise of ancestral healing. She touched the pages of the compendium, feeling the rough texture of the ancient paper. There was an urgency in the symbols, a message she needed to decipher before it was too late. It was not a threat, but a reminder that the balance was delicate and that healing, once achieved, needed to be maintained, nurtured. The apothecary had not finished speaking, and the overgrown land outside, with its shadows and mysteries, still held the next lesson. Donna Aurora's journey had deepened, transforming from a struggle for survival into a quest for greater meaning. She was not just a healed woman, she was an apprentice, a potential guardian. And the next step, she knew, would take her beyond the cabin's limits, into the heart of the forest, where the oldest secrets awaited revelation. The tension was no longer about illness, but about the unknown, about the destiny the apothecary and the overgrown land seemed to have charted for her. With a sharpened mind and a vibrating body, Donna Aurora felt the call of the forest intensify. It was no longer a whisper, but a deep, solemn song that seemed to come from the very roots of the earth. The compendium in her hands seemed to warm, and the symbols on the last pages glowed with an inner light, as if impatient. The ancient tree, the sun, the figure with open arms, she now saw them not as an enigma, but as an invitation, a roadmap for a pilgrimage that transcended the physical. What did the apothecary expect of her? That she become a bridge, a guardian. But how? Where to begin? She closed the compendium carefully, feeling the weight of ancestral wisdom in her hands. The cabin, once a safe refuge, now seemed small, a shell she needed to leave behind. The forest outside, which once represented danger and the unknown, now called to her with a promise of revelation. She put on her most resilient clothes, slipped on the boots she had found in a corner of the apothecary, surprisingly her size. With each movement, she felt renewed strength in her muscles, a lightness in her lungs. There was no longer the lacerating pain, the debilitating weakness. There was only vitality, clarity, and a determination she did not know she possessed. Before leaving, she looked around the apothecary, paying a silent homage to the place that had saved and transformed her. The dusty vials, the dark wooden shelves, the scent of herbs and earth, everything seemed to be in its rightful place, awaiting her return, or perhaps the next guardian. She knew the apothecary would not abandon her, that its knowledge would always be there, but the next lesson would not be learned within four walls. With the compendium firmly tucked under her arm, Donna Aurora opened the cabin door. The morning sunlight, filtered by the dense tree canopies, bathed her face. The fresh forest air enveloped her, laden with the aroma of damp earth, decomposing leaves, and the subtle sweetness of wildflowers. The sound of birds, the buzzing of insects, the rustling of leaves, everything intensified, as if she were hearing the world for the first time. She took the first step out of the cabin, treading on the soft earth. The sensation was different. It was not just the ground beneath her feet. It was the living earth, pulsing with energy. Her eyes swept the landscape, and what were once just weeds and overgrowth now revealed itself as a complex carpet of life, each plant with its own story, its own purpose. She felt a deep connection with every leaf, every root, as if she could hear their secrets. The symbol of the ancient tree in the compendium seemed to point to the heart of the forest, to an area where the trees were taller, denser, their trunks wider and gnarled. There was a faint, almost invisible trail that seemed to invite her in. It was not a path made by humans, but perhaps by animals, or by those who, like her, had sought the wisdom of the forest. The tension was palpable. There were no obvious monsters or dangers, but the vastness of the unknown was frightening. She was entering a world that had healed her, but which also held secrets that could challenge her understanding. What would she find within? What trials awaited her? The human figure with open arms in the compendium now seemed an invitation, but also a test of her faith and courage. Donna Aurora took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the forest in her veins. The journey had begun. She followed the trail, her steps light and firm, a stark contrast to the fragile woman who had arrived at the cabin. Every dry leaf that cracked under her boots, every sunbeam that penetrated the tree canopy, seemed like a message, a sign. The forest was not a silent place. It was a symphony of life, and she, for the first time, was attuned to its melody. The smell of damp earth and moss deepened, mingling with a sweet, resinous aroma that she could not identify, but which seemed to vibrate with an ancient energy. As she advanced, the trail became even more subtle, almost disappearing in some places, requiring Donna Aurora to trust her intuition, an internal compass that the apothecary seemed to have awakened. She looked at the compendium from time to time, not to decipher, but to confirm. The symbol of the ancient tree seemed to grow in her mind, projecting itself onto the shadows and lights of the forest. She knew she was getting closer. Then she saw it, a tree that defied imagination. Its trunk was so wide it looked like a small hill, covered in rough, gnarled bark, marked by centuries, perhaps millennia. Its branches, thick as smaller tree trunks, stretched towards the sky, forming a canopy so dense that sunlight barely penetrated, creating a sanctuary of twilight and reverence. It was the ancient tree without a doubt. The air around it was different, denser, charged with a palpable energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Donna Aurora approached with an almost religious reverence. She touched the tree's bark, feeling its rough, cold texture, but also a current of life that seemed to flow through its veins and roots to the center of the earth. It was like touching the heart of the forest itself. The compendium in her hands vibrated, and the symbols on the last pages pulsed with an intensity that almost blinded her. She closed her eyes, absorbing the energy. When she opened them again, she noticed something that had been hidden before. At the base of the ancient tree, there was an opening, not a cave, but a natural recess, almost a niche, covered in moss and ferns. It was dark inside, but a subtle glow seemed to emanate from within. Curiosity, mixed with a pang of apprehension, propelled her forward. Cautiously, she leaned in and peered. Inside the niche, there was a smooth, polished stone, almost translucent, that radiated a soft, golden light. It was the symbol of the sun, she realized. Not a sun in the sky, but a concentrated source of energy, a pulsing heart of the forest. As she approached, she felt the warmth of the stone, not a heat of fire, but a vital warmth, which seemed to nourish and invigorate. She reached out a hesitant hand and touched the stone. The instant her fingers made contact, a wave of energy coursed through her, more potent than anything she had ever felt. It was not the energy of healing illness, but an energy of knowledge, of connection. Images and sensations flooded her mind, the dance of roots beneath the earth, the flow of sap in the trees, the cycle of life and death, the interconnectedness of everything. She saw the forest as a single being, breathing, feeling, thinking, and she, Donna Aurora, was now a part of it. The tension transformed into an overwhelming revelation. The apothecary had not healed her merely so she could live, but so she could become a link, a guardian of this ancestral knowledge. The pulsing stone was the source, the heart of the forest, and the compendium was the map to understand and protect it. But the vision that followed was even more disturbing. Along with the beauty and interconnectedness, she felt a fragility, a vulnerability. The forest, despite its immense strength, was in danger. There was a growing shadow, a threat she could not identify, but which seemed to approach slowly and inexorably. The human figure with open arms in the compendium was not just an invitation to embrace nature, but a call to protect it. Donna Aurora's healing was just the first step. The true mission was just beginning, and she felt the weight of that responsibility fall upon her shoulders. The forest had revealed itself, and with it the magnitude of what was at stake. She was no longer just a sick widow. She was the guardian of a millennial secret, the last hope of an ecosystem that breathed and lived, and which now seemed to cry out for her help. The journey had deepened to a level she could never have imagined. The wave of energy receded, leaving Donna Aurora breathless, her hand still pressed against the pulsing stone. The vision of the forest as a living, interconnected being still resonated in her mind, but it was the shadow, the imminent threat, that now dominated her thoughts. It was not a clear image, but a sense of imbalance, of an external force approaching, eroding the vitality of that sanctuary. It was like a disease, but not one that affected a body, but an entire ecosystem, pulsing with a silent pain. She withdrew her hand from the stone, feeling an emptiness, a loss of that intense connection, but the clarity of the mission remained. The compendium, which was once a guide to healing, now revealed itself as a manual of war, a roadmap for protection. The figure with open arms was no longer just an invitation to harmony, but a silent cry for help. Donna Aurora took a step back from the tree, her eyes sweeping the gloom around her. The beauty of the forest, once so comforting, now seemed fragile, vulnerable. She felt the weight of centuries of wisdom, of life, of secrets, deposited on her shoulders. How could an elderly, newly healed widow face such a vast and undefined threat? Doubt was a subtle poison, trying to undermine her newfound strength. But then she remembered the pain, the weakness that had brought her to the brink of death. She remembered the despair, the resignation, and she remembered the apothecary, the herbs, the miraculous healing. She had been chosen. There was a reason. The forest had saved her. Now it was her turn to repay it. She opened the compendium again, the pages seeming heavier, more significant. The symbols, once enigmatic, now seemed to whisper secrets. The figure with open arms, the sun, the ancient tree. They were the pillars of her new faith, the foundations of her mission. But there were other, more complex symbols on the following pages. Drawings of constellations, phases of the moon, rivers and mountains, and more disturbingly, humanoid figures with strange tools cutting and burning. The shadow she had felt in the vision began to take shape. The threat was not mystical, not an internal disease of the forest. It was human. Greed, ignorance, destruction. It was the world she had come from, the world she had left behind, invading this sanctuary. A shiver ran down her spine. The cabin, the apothecary, the forest, all of it was a refuge, a last bastion of wisdom that the outside world had forgotten. And now that world was approaching. The compendium seemed to indicate a path, not with words, but with a sequence of symbols that connected, forming a kind of stellar, terrestrial and botanical map. The next stage was no longer about personal healing, but about understanding the interconnectedness of the forest and the dangers surrounding it. She needed to learn to read the signs, to understand the language of nature on a deeper level. She closed the compendium, feeling the urgency in her chest. The pulsing stone at the base of the tree seemed to diminish its glow, as if its energy was being absorbed, or perhaps as if it was waiting for something. Donna Aurora knew she could not stay there. The mission called her out, beyond the protection of the ancient tree. Her eyes swept the forest once more, but now with a new perspective. Every plant, every animal, every sound was a potential informant, a piece of the puzzle she needed to assemble. She needed to learn to listen, to observe, to feel. The tension was no longer a fear of the unknown, but a race against time. The threat was out there, invisible, yet palpable. She needed to prepare, to strengthen herself, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. She took one last look at the stone, at the opening at the base of the ancient tree. It was a portal to knowledge, a source of power. But power without action was useless. Turning, Donna Aurora began to retrace her steps, but not back to the cabin. The compendium in her hands seemed to direct her in a new direction, to a part of the forest she had not yet explored. A denser, darker stretch where the trees seemed to intertwine more intricately, forming a natural labyrinth. With each step, she felt the forest responding to her, as if recognizing her as its guardian. The smell of moss and earth deepened, mingling with an aroma of resin and something else, something metallic and distant, that made her wrinkle her nose. It was a strange smell, one that did not belong there. The trail, if it could even be called that, was almost non-existent. She guided herself by intuition, by the sensation of the compendium in her hands, which seemed to vibrate softly, like a pendulum. Sunlight barely penetrated, and the gloom deepened, creating an atmosphere of mystery and expectation. Suddenly, she stopped. The compendium pulsed stronger. Ahead of her, Between the gnarled roots of a colossal tree was a small, almost hidden clearing. In the center there was no stone, but a small lake of dark, still waters, reflecting the cloudy sky like an obsidian mirror. And at the edge of the lake, something that made her hold her breath. It was not a plant nor an animal. It was a structure, a small stone construction covered in moss and ivy, almost swallowed by the forest. It looked like an altar, or perhaps an ancient observatory. There were symbols carved into its stones, symbols she recognized from the compendium, but which now seemed more vivid, more three-dimensional. The tension was almost unbearable. She had found a new secret, a new link in the chain of knowledge. The lake, dark and mysterious, seemed to hold something, and the stone structure, a testament to a forgotten civilization, cried out for her attention. Donna Aurora's journey had transformed once more, from a quest for healing to a quest for meaning, and now to a race against time to unravel the secrets of a threatened forest before the shadow of the outside world consumed it. She was not just a guardian. She was an archaeologist of the spirit, a protector of a legacy the world had forgotten. And the stone altar at the edge of the dark lake seemed to be the next chapter of her extraordinary story. The stone altar at the edge of the dark lake seemed to be the next chapter of her extraordinary story. Donna Aurora approached with the reverence of one stepping on sacred ground. The structure, though small, radiated an ancient energy, a wisdom that time had failed to erase. Moss and ivy covered the stones, but the carved symbols, now sharper under her gaze, seemed to glow with a light of their own. Echoing the pages of the compendium in her hands, she touched one of the cold stones, feeling the roughness of time. The symbols were intricate, intertwining spirals, concentric circles, stylized figures of animals, and again, the representation of the ancient tree, but this time with roots that seemed to extend into the lake itself. The distant metallic scent that had intrigued her subtly intensified, mingling with the damp aroma of earth and still water. It was a smell of invasion, of something that did not belong, but was approaching. The compendium in her hands vibrated, not like a pendulum, but like one heart responding to another. She opened it, and a specific page seemed to light up softly, revealing a drawing that resembled the altar before her. But there was a crucial detail. In the drawing, the lake was not dark and still, but radiated a silvery light, and in its center, a small island with a single lotus flower blooming. Donna Aurora looked up at the real lake, dark, motionless waters reflecting the gloom of the forest. There was no lotus flower, no island. The vision in the compendium was of a past time, or perhaps of a possible future, an idealized or lost version of that sanctuary. The tension increased. What had happened to the flower, to the light? She knelt at the edge of the lake, her hand still holding the compendium. The surface of the water was like an obsidian mirror, deep and unfathomable. Slowly, she extended her free hand and touched the water. It was cold, almost glacial, and a feeling of sadness, of forgottenness, invaded her. It was as if the lake wept in silence. The instant her fingers made contact, the dark surface began to ripple. Not from her touch, but as if something from within was awakening. The metallic scent grew stronger, more pungent, almost suffocating. The vision that followed did not come from the stone, but from the water. The darkness of the lake dissolved, and images began to emerge, like an ancient film projected onto a liquid screen. She saw trees falling, chainsaws roaring, tractors tearing the earth. She saw rivers being diverted, their waters murky and polluted. She saw smoke rising to the heavens, covering the sun. And she saw human figures, not like the guardians in the compendium, but like predators with empty eyes and greedy hands. The shadow she had felt in the vision of the ancient tree now had form, sound, and smell. It was destruction, greed, the ignorance of the outside world approaching slowly and inexorably, like a disease consuming the forest from the outside in. The metallic scent was that of machines, of pollution, of death. The tension transformed into a sharp pain in Donna Aurora's chest. The forest was dying, and she felt every cut, every wound, as if they were her own. The lotus flower in the compendium, the silvery light of the lake, they were memories of a time when balance existed, before the shadow had stretched so far. But the vision did not end in despair. As the images of destruction intensified, a new image began to superimpose itself, faint at first, but growing in clarity. She saw herself, not the old sick widow, but a figure of light, with outstretched hands, planting seeds, healing trees, whispering to the waters. She saw other figures, also of light, joining her, each with a task, each a link in the chain of life. The lotus flower in the center of the lake began to sprout again in the vision, not as a static image, but as a process, a rebirth driven by her own actions. The silvery light returned, not as a passive glow, but as an active force repelling the darkness. The wave of images receded, and the surface of the lake returned to its original darkness. But now, Donna Aurora felt a new kind of energy emanating from it. Not sadness, but a resilient hope. The compendium, which was once a manual of war, revealed itself as a guide for restoration, a map for rebirth. She stood up, her legs firm, her mind clear. The mission was not just to protect, but to heal, not just to defend, but to rebuild. The threat was real, imminent, but the forest had its own defenders, and she was now one of them. Donna Aurora looked at the altar, at the lake, at the dense forest around her. She was no longer a sick widow seeking healing. She was the guardian, the healer, the voice of a forgotten legacy. The weight of responsibility was still there, but now it was accompanied by an unwavering strength, a determination she had never known she possessed. The metallic scent still hung in the air, a constant reminder of the danger. But Donna Aurora felt no fear. She felt a purpose. The journey had reached its climax, not with an end, but with a new beginning. She had been chosen, healed, and now empowered. The outside world could approach, but the forest had a guardian, and she was ready to fight for every leaf, every root, every drop of life. With the compendium firmly in her hands, Donna Aurora turned, not to return to the cabin, but to delve deeper into the forest. The fight was just beginning, and she, the old widow who had bought a cabin for a pittance, was now the last hope of a sanctuary that cried out for her help. She was no longer alone. The forest was with her, and she was with the forest forever.